supporting and maintaining the very rich businesses there, not necessarily a police department right there.
My name is Barakat Kiros. I am a member of WAMA, Washington Media Association for Africa.
Mohammed Ahmed, and also a member of the WAMA community.
Our guest tonight is Sir Rebecca Saldana, the State Senate District 437. Welcome to WAMA Studio, and we are delighted to see you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be invited to come and speak with WAMA tonight.
So just a little bit background of WAMA. WAMA is a collective media in Washington State, mostly East Africans, who have shared issues that impact their communities of color.
Thanks for coming, Senator. You're currently you're in the State Senate Democratic Leadership Team serving the caucus whip. City of Takwila give them notice in a small East African community business, and they're about to close the end of the year. What's your position on how you can help?
Yeah, so first of all, just for the audience out there, I want to give a little bit of background of what it means to be a state senator, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll definitely dig into the question. Yes. Because I come from a Latino community, but I've done a lot of work in the 37th, which is one of our most diverse districts in Washington State. I will say in Takwila, it is important that we're supporting small businesses, and as a community member, I was the executive director of Puget Sound Sage before I was elected as a state senator, and continue to work in our communities, and as such have built important relationships and deep admiration and respect for the businesses, particularly the Somali businesses. But at the event that we were at last week, also met a Latina business owner as well. And so we appreciate that the communities are organizing. And in terms of what I can do, a couple of things. I mean, one, as a statewide elected, is looking at how can we support our local jurisdictions to have the resources they need to be able to make sure that they are supporting small businesses and are not displacing them, and that and I think part of that is making sure that, particularly at that particular site, those two sites, both in SeaTac and Takwila now, that are looking at displacement, that this is close to light rail. The state invested a lot of money, taxpayer money, to build the light rail, and the light rail is supposed to stimulate equitable development, and part of that is supporting small businesses. What should be built near light rail are easy businesses, housing, resources that community has prioritized, not. And I think that the community that I heard and went to listen to and show my support with were very clear that their priority is supporting and maintaining the very rich businesses there, not necessarily a police department right there. So
it's too late?
No,
it's not too late. I mean, the organizing, I think, is being heard.
Most of the colored people are are living their neighborhood, and most of the neighborhood is getting wider and wider. As a result of that, gentrification has become an issue. How do you utilize your experience to convince other senators?
Well, I mean, I think one was, so this year I introduced a couple of different pieces of legislation. One would have addressed the issue and the need for considering how do we keep rents from going up. So we had basically something that would take away because right now local cities and towns can't do rent control because of a state law. So I introduced policy that would have removed that state law and allow local communities to have more tools in their toolbox of what they need. That included setting aside money and getting money that will go towards the Ethiopian community, senior housing, as well as the Filipino community centers, looking to also build senior housing there. So we have money set aside for them. Also, in this budget, we were able to get money for a REWA project that would expand affordable childcare services in our neighborhoods. So so that's one way, is that we can work with community. If you have a project that you're working on that you need some financing, or you are putting things together but you need a little bit more money, that's something that, whether if you live in my district, contact me.
Tax system is based on property tax and local tax and excise tax. And we have those mega billion corporations. How do we propose or change the current tax code, which is outdated, that doesn't go?
Right. So first of all, there's a couple of things. I mean, I think one, again, this is a place...
I'm talking about like capital gain,
right,
and others. Yeah.
Yes. No, and so capital gains is a viable option, and begins to start writing the upside down tax system. And basically, I would say we have a lot of philanthropic, wealthy folks that, you know, right now our state doesn't give them the infrastructure they need to be able to pay their fair share. And so I do believe that there's a Tech Alliance, there's you know, some wealthy people that have said they're willing to do some of the pay.
What do you think about the idea of providing rebate household with lower income and moderate? Are you favor? How can you
tell me more. So would it be
like
for property tax or
they're
just
facing like higher rent and everything is expensive? So anything that will help rebate, that will give them those people. Are you favor with that?
I am interested in exploring it, because I mean, I think there are some rebates right now. There are some different programs that people may not be aware of. So with property tax, if you're a senior with a fixed income, there's ways right now that either you can get exempt entirely from paying that, or you can push it back until you actually sell your house. And so that's something that I think a lot of our seniors may not even know could help right now. And then I think the other piece is I am in favor of making sure that we right size, you know, to what Erica was saying. I'm more interested in making sure we actually have everyone pay their fair share. Here's why I'm not immediately saying yes to rebates, because I was part of, again, before I was in the Senate, I was part of organizing what is now a climate initiative, an initiative that will be on the ballot this year, hopefully, if people sign up for it. But basically was looking at, if we do if we actually have polluters pay and actually put a price on pollution, you know, recognizing poor people, like, always can't, we still need to drive where they need to go, and their income's not going to go. It's going to have an impact on them. And so we're looking at rebates, and there's a lot of challenges because we don't have a state income tax, which again is something that if constituents are interested in, that's where we can do rebates or incentives if you have that, because we don't have that in place.
Census coming the next 2 years. As you know, census provide a critical information about population. We are concerned that our diverse community will be underrepresented because of the current Trump citizenship question and the climate of distrust among this leadership. Do you help community-based organizations like CERC and WAMA and non-profit organizations to fund those hard to count? I don't call them hard to count. It is easy to count if we are getting involved ourselves. I don't know why they call it hard to count, because you know we are part of the community. They trust. As you know, if I have to go a little bit further, Governor initially he had executive order on the DMV question that I was on Olympia. DMV. Yeah, the DMV. But Pat Collar, the director, she was working with ISIS, sending those information. So people now have mistrust because of that. So we have a lot of challenges in this regard. So one way to elevate this mistrust is to work with communities of color, so that those hard count, they call them hard count communities. So what do you think in this regard?
Yes. So you brought up a couple different things. But I would say this, first of all, making sure that every person is counted and every person residing in Washington feels that they can participate in the census is critical. You know, First of all, the next thing is that I'm also part of a couple of different caucuses. So we have our members of color Senate and members of color House. And the Senate, just to be clear, there's 5 of us, and no one is African descent. So I hope that the third thing is the Washington Voting Rights Act. And so this is a piece of legislation that we passed this year, and I bring it up because it's connected to our census work. And the Washington Voting Rights Act means that in the port, for instance, the Port of Seattle, right now you have to run at large. We had a very viable candidate last year, Ahmed, and who was running, but he had to run across the whole state. There's no one really representing South King County on our ports. So this would be an opportunity for us to look and see, is there an opportunity to use a new Washington Voting Rights Act to create districts that actually are representative of the different portions and different populations.
And this question you already answered some part of it. How do you improve the existing job training program to meet the needs of the community of color?
Jobs training? Mm-hmm. So here is something that I'm curious in terms. So one thing happened when I was in college, almost 20 years ago, which was an initiative called I-200, mm-hmm. and this has been a challenge now for all people of color and women, businesses, contractors, educators, because it makes it harder for us to look at diversity, ethnicity, as we are making sure that we're giving equal opportunities to all of the, whether it's our schools or whether it's government contracts or whether it's jobs. And so this year, for the first time, we're able to have a hearing in another committee that I serve on, which is state government and tribal affairs, and had I would say a lot of people from my district came down. A lot of our older African American civil rights leaders were there. But we also had testimony from all of our public institutions, because the data shows in the Department of Transportation alone, we used to have contracting more at 10% for people of color and minority businesses. We're down to 3%. And that is unacceptable when we have demographics we know are changing rapidly in Washington state. So repealing I-200 is something that needs a multiracial, multi-generational education campaign, because a lot of new people coming to Washington state don't even know that this is that they don't have the same opportunities. There's an extra barrier in place for kids to be able to get into college or to become teachers, and we need to change that. And so that's one of the things that I'm working with Representative Santos, who also represents the 37th, and Representative Javier Valdez, and how do we help build more education, build community awareness of this, because this will be something that then makes it easier for making sure that everyone has a fair chance at the jobs and the opportunities that are here. The
mental health is among immigrant communities high and unspoken about the culture and mistrust. Mm-hmm. It's the way you can see WAMA and you get that we can work together about this issue about mental health.
I would be very interested in exploring what that would look like. I mean, I think part of it is in a lot of our communities, I would say there is a lack of knowledge or some stigma around what it means to have mental health, right? Or mental health problems, or to be on the spectrum, and that can be really a challenge. So whether it's on education, or whether it's bringing resources, or whether it's actually just making sure. So one of the things that people may know is that we had a big court issue around education in McCleary. So, we addressed that in these last 2 sessions, but we also have another lawsuit against the state that we are also in contempt of, which is called True Blood. And I will not get into the weeds. And health professionals. I'll say one more thing about jobs, because I feel like it's related to this as well, is the Somali Health Board had brought to me the issue and concern that we have a lot of folks that come from East Africa that are highly educated in particular, but in Africa in particular, that have higher education in terms of people that are able to make all the loopholes and finally get here, often had some more privilege before they got here. And so there are folks that are trained as doctors, as nurses, as professionals, but then in terms of being certified or having that, expertise recognized here is a huge barrier. And I know, so I think in trying to figure out how do we help get more professionals that are bilingual and bicultural in the field also helps with the stigma, right? And so one thing that we did this year was allow permanent residents to be able now to serve in our law enforcement and in and firefighting. So anyone out there that would like to work as an officer that's going to be culturally competent, that is going to be prepared to de-escalate situations and knows our community will be good community officers, we should really consider that pathway again. You do not have to wait until you are a full citizen. You can do it as a permanent resident.
You're running re-election this year.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to tell the community?
At the end of the day, I do believe that democracy matters, but it only works when we actually have everyone fully participating. And so you'll hopefully see me at your door. I'm having a community event on May 20th, and you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, at my website, RebeccaSaldana.com, as well as my official website. So thank you again so much. So honored to be here, and really appreciate the work of that you guys are doing as the association, because it is really important to make sure that the community is hearing from their local electeds as well as the international news, right?